Hello, my dear viewers. I'm Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner world of personality. Today, I would like to talk with you about emotions. I am actively preparing for a webinar that will take place next Saturday, and I am exploring the topic of emotion. What are emotions in general? Emotions are a product of our subjectivity. That is, we have a certain personal, individual attitude towards something. This concerns us directly. And for a person who lacks boundaries, there will be nothing that does not concern them. They will perceive everything as relating to themselves. Here in this drawing, I have depicted a certain line, a boundary of sorts, which, when crossed, gives the person a profound and unmistakable sense that they truly exist, that they are present in the world, and that their presence is real and significant. That is, before this line, I do not feel that I exist. I am not manifested outwardly. And after this line, I begin to feel that I exist. For example, the world responds to me. I realize that I have just expressed my own point of view. That at this moment, I am fully manifested. And for different people, these parameters of manifestation, this unique sense of existence, will be completely different. I began this video by saying that a person who is fixated on themselves does not perceive anything. It is as if they do not see or hear any information that does not concern them personally. And the more a person is fixated or focused on themselves, the more vivid and intense a reaction they need from the outside world in order to truly understand and recognize that the world sees them, that they actually exist. In other words, I need a certain specific kind of reaction from the outside world. And then I cross this boundary of non-existence and realize that I exist, that I am. But what is this boundary? What exactly are we overcoming? I believe that each of you understands the state of non-existence, I am not, and the state of I am. I feel that I am alive. But what exactly are we overcoming? And by what are we oppressed into this non-existence, into this feeling of I am not? Let's try to figure this out. Here, I compare this straight line that we are overcoming to an airplane breaking through the sound barrier, reaching hypersonic speed just as the plane overcomes this barrier. In the same way, by overcoming something, we begin to feel that we exist. In other words, we can draw a reverse conclusion if we reason logically that we are under some kind of pressure, that something is weighing down on us. Now, let each of us try to recall what circumstances would have to occur, what would need to happen for you to feel as if you do not exist when you are among other people. Or, for instance, when you are at home alone, there are also moments when you feel that you exist, that you are truly alive, and at other times you do not. In other words, we are under a certain kind of pressure. For example, my grandmother, when she pickled cucumbers, would take a lid and place a heavy stone on it so that the cucumbers would become properly pickled. Pressure being under pressure, under some kind of weight, under something that restrains us. I think that when a person is in a group of people and the group is unfamiliar to them and the person sits silently, not expressing themselves, not participating in the conversation, then at some point this feeling of non-existence begins to grow. It's as if I am not here, I am not noticed, I am not seen, I do not exist. We need the external world to respond, to react to the fact that we exist. or we need some kind of internal sense of I am. For example, if I am sitting in a group and people are engaged in their own conversations, I'm listening attentively, I'm interested, I'm thinking a lot, processing information, analyzing. I often do this and analyze. In my mind, it's as if videos are being recorded, posts are being written, so I have less of a sense that I don't exist, because even when I am silent, I seem to continue producing my own personal output. I don't feel like I'm being ignored or overlooked. I don't have the feeling that I don't exist. I am in contact with this world. But if an overwhelming emotion arises, my thinking will stop. I will cease to think, and the feeling that I do not exist will begin to grow. So, this weight we are talking about now, this pressure under which the personality exists, it seems to become heavier at times, then lighter, then heavier again, then lighter. In what circumstances does this weight become heavier? In what situations do we feel this pressure on ourselves? It is the oppression of oneself, the suppression of oneself, the restraint of oneself. I'm listing synonyms for this pressure so that we not only listen to this information, but also truly feel it. As I say this now, I am experiencing it as well. In my memories, I recall those moments when I was under this pressure, and this pressure would become either stronger or weaker. And it felt as if, in order to express myself, I had to overcome some headwind, to push through the tension of rubber ropes that were holding me, keeping me fixed in the same position. If I get past it, I can speak. In a new group, it's scary, you don't know how people will react, and the weight just gets heavier. What is this weight? You see, in this drawing, everything is exactly the same, except that this arrow has become bolder. That is, we often perceive this pressure as something external, as if it is the group that is pressing down on me. I come into a new group, and it feels like they are putting pressure on me. As if it's not me putting pressure on myself. But after some time, when I get to know these people better, it seems as though the group no longer puts that pressure on me. How can that be? The people are the same, and I am the same. But this pressure sometimes increases, sometimes decreases. So something is off. The issue lies elsewhere. When I am in a new environment, a new group, a new team, I experience many more emotions inside, much more fear, because there is much more uncertainty. In a familiar, recognizable setting, we feel less fear. There is less fear or anxiety. Some people say there is less anxiety. We feel less nervous. It seems as if we experience fewer of those very emotions we talked about at the very beginning. I already know these people. I know how each person reacts, what to expect from whom. I already understand what kind of relationships I have with them, and I feel more relaxed. And it feels like I can express myself more. Do you remember our first drawing? So when this group is unfamiliar, I do not express myself. When I settle down a bit, I feel more present, I speak up more, I take part in the conversation. So I have allowed myself to come out. In order for us to understand the essence of these processes, and it is only after understanding the essence that we will be able to manage them. It's understanding that allows us to manage. We'll be able to handle our fear and the pressure it creates. Understanding its nature will allow us to reduce it. Let's figure out what it is. When we are born, this pressure does not exist. We express ourselves freely. With our mouths wide open, we cry out. We do what we want. As babies, we just went to the bathroom. If we didn't like something, we screamed. There is no such pressure. This pressure arises when we begin to have some understanding that we are dependent on other people, that all the benefits are in their hands. In the womb, this did not exist. In the womb, everything was provided for us. Once we are born, we immediately become dependent. It doesn't matter what kind of parents we had, we are still dependent on them. We are still insignificant, incomplete, and all the benefits are in their hands. As long as we can't meet our own needs, we stay dependent on the adults around us. That's why we have to control our behavior to keep their approval, and with it, the things we rely on. This is how the pressure builds up, bringing with it forced self-restraint and self-aggression. This pressure is in fact self-aggression because we suppress ourselves in order to, by suppressing ourselves, obtain what we desire. In other words, we begin to control our own behavior, and this behavioral control allows us to receive more than if we did not control ourselves. This pressure allows us to socialize. We have discussed that in different groups and at different times, this pressure on ourselves can be greater or lesser. That is, when the amount of my internal emotions increases, the restraining factor also increases. In other words, the people who control themselves the most are those who are excessively emotional. Because if you are not excessively emotional, there is nothing to control. So this pressure depends on the amount of emotion. When we talk about a new group or team, I use this example just to help you recall, but you can feel the same thing at home, even when you are alone. In other words, all the same processes, in fact, occur, even when no one else is around. This tombstone, this heavy pressure, this unyielding concrete slab, this persistent self-suppression on the one hand, it seems to suppress, or rather to restrain and limit our activity and behavior. But on the other hand, it is precisely this very mechanism, this internal process, that in fact actually stops us from taking any actions that are driven by intense emotions, whether positive or negative. If our emotionality exceeds this control, then we break through and do what we want. We blurt things out instead of speaking thoughtfully. If a person does not understand how the external world works, if they are too fixated on themselves and are not interested in the world, then the only way they can restrain themselves is through control. In other words, they are constantly preoccupied with themselves. How will people react to me? How will people look at me? What will people think about me? And these are the factors that one way or another determine how he presents himself to the outside world. He is interested only in himself, not in other people, not in the future consequences for these people or for relationships. A person who is fixated on themselves is interested only in themselves, and they will relate everything that happens to themselves. And because of this self-absorption, there will be an enormous amount of emotions. In other words, the more a person is fixated on themselves, the less external world they have. The inner world is enormous, while the external world is small. The greater the self-absorption, the stronger the emotional reaction to everything, to how I am perceived, to how people look at me, to what is said about me, and so on and so forth. It is as if I do not allow this world to exist without myself. And because there is too much of myself within me, I have to increase my control in order to restrain my emotions. That is, if I do not understand the nature of my excessive emotions, then I do not understand why I have so much fear. why I have so much need for control, why I feel so oppressed. And without understanding this, I will project the cause outward. It will always seem to me that someone is putting pressure on me. In such moments, there is always someone who says, but doesn't society put pressure on us? And this person, by asking such a question, is fantasizing about themselves having complete freedom. In other words, I can do whatever I want with people. They pressure me, and that's why I feel oppressed. It's important to see the difference between freedom and permissiveness. It's almost as if in many situations we feel that we need some kind of external reason or justification in order to finally allow ourselves to openly express who we truly are as individuals. You see, for us, it doesn't really matter whether we express ourselves through aggression, through shouting, through tears, or through a precisely articulated thought. As if for our personality as a whole, what truly matters is simply this act of expression. But how? The quality of this expression is not as important. For example, if someone, in our opinion, is behaving incorrectly and we shout at them in anger, we are expressing ourselves, we might pour all of our emotions outward, we become overwhelming, filling the entire space with our presence. In this case, our psyche will perceive this as a success because my existence was at its maximum. When there are too many emotions and the weight of control is too great, a person becomes dependent on experiencing emotions. They need more and more emotions. They find it boring to listen to meaningful speeches, boring to read philosophers, boring to read articles. There has to be a surge of emotions, something that grabs their attention emotionally. Because when I experience emotions while listening to or reading something, in that moment I feel that I exist, I'm used to it that way. But meanings, understanding the essence, I don't experience emotions, so I don't feel that I exist. You see, what we have here is a kind of emotional addiction, a dependency. It's as if the meaning of what the person is saying doesn't matter to me. What matters are the emotions I experience. And in this way, a person can become dependent on whatever evokes emotions in them, because that's when they feel alive. It can even go as far as this. Being in a relationship with someone what is called an abuser, someone who causes pain or who disappears and reappears, who rejects and then draws closer. I swing between emotions and start feeling real, becoming dependent on this person. I feel alive. This habit of experiencing emotions, of feeling my own existence through emotional intensity, makes a person excessively expressive. Some people don't just speak, they shout. They don't simply share something, they fill the entire space, pushing the other person out. It's as if they are hungry for attention. They need to be at the center all the time. They can't just talk, they have to perform. Their words are charged with emotion, aimed at pulling you in. It's through your strong reaction that they feel present, alive, reflected in someone else. An excessive reaction? In this excessive reaction, I too will feel a surge of my own emotions. And this is the ultimate sense of I exist. This is how this pattern should look. It's unclear how to express oneself until the external world appears. For a person who is fixated on themselves, the external world is merely an environment to exist in. It is unexplored, unfamiliar, and therefore there is no real contact with it. All attention is on oneself, self-control, thinking about oneself. But at the moment when a genuine interest in the external world arises, control is no longer necessary. There is an understanding of oneself, and there is an understanding of the external world. Of course, this is a 15-minute video, or however long I've been talking already. That's all, we're out of time. I will be delving into the topic of emotions during the webinar. There, it won't be exactly the same, but it will be similar and much more extensive. YouTube videos are not intended for a long format. What else would I like to say on this topic? This sense of oppression, this deadening, is especially noticeable in interactions with close people. When we are hurt by another person, this happens when we do not get what we want. We begin to build up this layer of ice. In psychology, this kind of oppression is often referred to as narcissistic defenses. But in my view, this term does not fully capture the essence and diversity of this process. We begin to build up coldness with those close to us in order to avoid being hurt. We can develop exactly the same kind of coldness toward the outside world and toward ourselves. In other words, it is a kind of anesthesia, alienation, estrangement. It's the act of sorting things out even with strong emotions that helps melt the ice. That's what's been held back. Remember, the more emotions are trying to break through, the greater the pressure that is needed. And when I have already let all of this out, I no longer need to hold back. It is as if I can then warm up toward my partner, become warmer toward him, because I no longer need to restrain anything. I have let it all out. Let us return to the very beginning. We have come a long way, and now we return to the beginning. You see, everything started out simply, then everything became more complicated. There is a line after which I begin to feel that I exist. The more I am fixated on myself, the more I need to fill the space with myself in order to feel that I exist. This is the act of filling the space with my own subjectivity, with the products of my subjectivity. I think each of you understands what it means to shout AAA and what it means to express a precise thought, a relevant, personal, original one. One can manifest oneself through the products of subjectivity or through originality of thought. And the greater the emotionality, the stronger this pressure will be. I hope you found this interesting. Please share your thoughts and insights that came to you while watching the video, because it is precisely your original thoughts, and especially those that are written and expressed, that create the sense that you exist. So share your thoughts, continue this discussion in the comments, make yourself known. Be I am, at least in the comments on my YouTube channel. Do subscribe if the content speaks to you. Thanks for being here. Wishing you well, and see you next time.